Welcome everybody, my name is Amy and today I will be discussing advocacy services in South Australia. Today I'll be discussing what advocacy is, a brief history of advocacy in Australia, where people with disabilities can go to seek assistance, what different advocacy services for people with disabilities are available, advocacy services for the elderly, advocacy and mentoring services for people with an intellectual disability. I will also present a short video by the Citizen Advocacy Service as an example of a service provider in the community. I will discuss advocacy services and assistance for people with acquired brain injury. In addition, I will also advise where to go should people with disabilities have a complaint or if they feel they are being discriminated against. So let's start. First of all, let's think about what advocacy actually means. Advocacy is ensuring the human and legal rights of people with disabilities are promoted. Advocacy ensures that people with disabilities are able to make decisions about their lives. And advocacy also means providing information and support to people with disabilities so they can advocate for themselves. A bit of information and history of advocacy in Australia. In 1908, the Australian government introduced the invalid pension, which increased the independence of people with disability as well as provided them with acknowledgement to some extent as recognised members of the society. After the First World War and the return of many soldiers with impairments, the government funded rehabilitation programs. With the increased numbers of people with disability, they all couldn't be institutionalised, and this demographic change acted as a step towards disability as a better recognised condition. After the Second World War, there was a similar impact, and this strengthened the belief that people with disabilities have a right to lead decent lives. The Commonwealth Rehabilitation Service was established, and volunteer organisations extended their services to people with disabilities. During the 1950s and 1960s, many people rallied for better inclusion of people with a disability in society. And up until the late 1970s, the views of people with disabilities were mainly expressed only through the voices of disability service providers, professionals, or others working in the area of disability and/or family members. 1981 was a turning point in the history of the Australian and international disability rights movements. Disabled Persons International held its first World Assembly in Singapore in the context of the International Year of Disabled Persons, which had been declared by the United Nations in that year. In 1986, disability rights advocacy was recognised as a program area to be funded under the Disability Services Act 1986. Since then, disability activism and advocacy began a sustained focus on several important cornerstones of disability self-determination. This enlightened mental health legislation in various states, the establishment of public advocates and guardianship boards in most states. The Disability Services Act 1986 and the Disability Discrimination Act 1992 includes this. In 2008, the adoption and ratification by the Australian Government of the United Nations Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is the most recent major advancement of Australian disability rights movement and in the lives of people with disabilities. So who can access advocacy services? Well, anybody with a disability, whether it be physical, sensory, neurological, intellectual, and/or people with acquired brain injuries, can access advocacy services. In addition, the elderly and people with mental health conditions or vulnerable persons can also access advocacy services. This then got me thinking, if I was living with a disability and wanted someone to help support my choices and help me to advocate for myself or on my behalf, where would I go to seek assistance? After looking on the internet and finding countless websites with a lot of information, I decided to start small. I contacted the Disability Information and Resource Centre in the Adelaide Central Business District. The Disability Information and Resource Centre is a one-stop shop and provides information on disabilities for the public. They have a directory on all listed services in South Australia. They can provide referrals to external providers. They provide links to local support groups for people with disabilities. And they also provide access to an online social media portal named Enable Link, which allows people with disabilities to connect with like-minded individuals via the internet. This service allowed me to provide the next set of information to you, whom is now watching at home. So then it got me thinking about advocacy services for the elderly and what is really available. The elderly and people with reduced mental capacity can access many services. The Aged Rights Advocacy Service is a free service that is fully confidential and available to the elderly people living in Commonwealth housing or receiving services in their home who may be experiencing abuse. Advocates will assist to uphold elderly people's rights and entitlements. In addition, the Seniors Information Service can make referrals to advocacy services and other allied health teams. They can provide information on rights and entitlements as outlined by law. They can also assist with housing services and provide information about aged care facilities, including vacancies, fees and charges, and home and community care service options. There are also services for people specifically living with a disability. The Disability Service of South Australia provides general assistance and advocacy services to all people living with a disability. The public trustee can assist with all things legal and can especially assist with issues surrounding medical and general power of attorneys and wills. This also made me wonder, are there any disability advocacy services for people that do not speak English? The Disability Rights Advocacy Service assists both people that can and cannot speak English. They can also provide assistance and referrals for specialised interpreter services to assist people to. There are also services for people living specifically with an intellectual disability. There are many, but the one I thought was most interesting and helpful was the Citizen Advocacy Service of South Australia. They are a free service and can provide one-on-one advocacy for people with intellectual disabilities. They can also arrange mentoring, relationships between a person with an intellectual disability and the citizen whom is free from conflict of interest. All mentors are trained, oriented, and given ongoing support and require a police clearance. As mentoring services for people with disabilities is of much interest for me, the Citizen Advocacy Service provided me with a link to a short clip on how their service helps everyday people living with a disability, and I would like to show this to you.
Advocacy is quite a simple concept. It's all it is looking after the best interests of another person. I guess it has two dimensions. One is being someone's friend and being a part of their lives and welcoming them into your life. And the other part is more of a monitor to make sure that Wayne is getting all of his needs met and that he can do what he wants to do without too many restrictions. We see each other about once a month, don't we? Once every 3 or 4 weeks? Yeah. Yeah, that level of commitment's quite good. It lets me keep a tab on what's happening in Wayne's life and lets me get on with my life as well. One of the good things about being an advocate and for Wayne to have an advocate is that Wayne has spent his whole life basically inside the service system, and he only hangs out with people with disabilities and people who are paid to be in his life. The good thing is that I'm not paid to be in his life. I do it out of my own choice. And Wayne can now come out with me to the footy and to barbecues and to meet my friends. So it's opened up his whole world.
He's helped me in quite a lot in problems that we have had in my life. He's been a friend for a long time.
I've been Gordon's citizen advocate now for 14 years. My role as an advocate with Gordon has varied. In the first place, we did engage in activities together. we went once a week to Eltham over 50s activities at the Eltham Leisure Centre. Then it got quite busy, as I said, when I was helping out with problems he had with his sister. But then, since then, mostly it's been in a companionable sort of role. But Gordon's always aware that if he has a problem that he wants to discuss with me, that I'm just there at the end of the phone. Being a citizen advocate for me has been an opportunity to contribute to, I suppose in the abstract, to the community, but also been an opportunity to be helpful in the life of Gordon, who needed somebody a bit different in his life who could be a friend and a spokesperson.
Hi, my name is Ron. This is my wife Jenny. This is our friend Kate, and this is my home. I like living here. I do gardening, mow lawns. I've got a boy known as Oscar. He's 13. When we first met Kate, and we went to Heidelberg to a cafe for lunch, met Kate there, and then from there on then we started becoming good friends, and Kate's been a really good help to our family. She takes us out shopping when we want to go. We go out for morning tea. If we got problems, we ring her up, and then we talk to her about the problems.
We go like, the day trips like up Phillip Island one time and all that. We mainly talk about, problems and all that. And Kate's there to help us.
When I was working as a volunteer in the Citizen Advocacy Office, Sister Frances rang up and asked for an advocate for Ron and Jen. And I felt that it was a situation that I could be involved in, so I volunteered to be their advocate. When you start as an advocate, you get an orientation about being a citizen advocate and also about the protege that you're going to be involved with. And then over time, the Citizen Advocacy Office runs workshops. I found as an advocate that I haven't needed any particular experience beforehand. I don't work, so I have a reasonable amount of time. But Ron and Jenny are quite careful of not taking too much of my time, which I really appreciate. And we tend to do things during the week, but every so often when there's a birthday or something, I'll go out with them on the weekend or at night.
Our lives is a lot better now since we had Kate. It's good to have a good friend like Kate.
I'd say if someone wanted to become an advocate, I'd say go for it. It's not as hard as what you think. It's only a small commitment that you have to put in, and it makes a real difference in Wayne's life.
As not everybody was born with a disability, it got me thinking, are there services for people who've acquired a brain injury? The Brain Injury Network of South Australia is funded by the Australian Government to provide individual, self-advocacy and legal advocacy for people who have acquired brain injuries. They provide free advocacy and support to people with an acquired brain injury and or their family members to help to safeguard their human and civil rights and gain access to needed specialist community or generic services. So who can assist if people are living with a disability feel they are being discriminated against or have a grievance or complaint they would like external help to resolve? The Disability Advocacy and Complaint Service is a free and independent advocacy service to people with disabilities and their associates. They can assist to raise and resolve complaints. Advocates also play a variety of roles, from providing support to people who wish to advocate for themselves, right through to representing people in tribunals and in meetings with service providers. The South Australian Ombudsman deals with the complaints about any agency or business within the Ombudsman's jurisdiction. Ombudsman's SA may conduct investigations to determine whether the processes directed towards the individual was reasonable or fair, and that the decision is not unreasonable or unlawful. And finally, the South Australian Equal Opportunity Commission can investigate cases of discrimination against people because of a disability. So just to recap what we've discussed today. Today we talked about what advocacy is. We discussed a brief history of advocacy in Australia, where to seek assistance, advocacy services for people with disabilities, advocacy services for the elderly, advocacy and mentoring services for people with an intellectual disability. We also watched a short video on the Citizen Advocacy Service. We looked at advocacy services and assistance for people with acquired brain injuries. And finally, information on where to go should people with disabilities have a complaint or feel they are being discriminated against. I hope this presentation provided you with information on the kinds of services that are available for people living with a disability. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have any further questions, I recommend you contact the Disability Information and Resource Centre in Adelaide, as I found them very helpful and informative. Their contact details can be found earlier in this presentation.